The medical station on Kepler 7 smelled like blood and burning plastic. Maya Torres had been working for 16 hours straight, and her hands had stopped shaking around hour 12. That was when she knew she was either getting better at this job or losing her mind. She was 24 years old, fresh out of medical training on Earth, and she had seen more death in the past 3 weeks than most doctors saw in a lifetime. The war with the Virecti hegemony had been going on for 11 years now. Maya had grown up watching it on news screens, safe in her apartment in Chicago. Now, she was living inside it. The forward medical station was a collection of pressurized tents connected by narrow corridors. It sat on a rocky moon with thin air and constant dust storms. Wounded soldiers came in on shuttles every few hours. Some walked, some were carried, some arrived in bags. Maya worked in Ward 7, which handled moderate injuries. The soldiers here would live, probably. They had lost limbs or taken plasma burns, or breathed in toxic atmosphere. They were the lucky ones. She was changing bandages on a young private when the new patients arrived. 4 stretchers came through the airlock, carried by tired medics in dirty uniforms. Maya finished her work and walked over to help with triage. The first 3 patients were standard cases: shrapnel wounds, a broken spine, severe dehydration. Maya directed them to different wards and updated their files on her tablet. The 4th patient was different. He was older than most soldiers she saw. Late 40s, maybe 50. His hair was gray and cut short. His face was weathered and calm, even though he had a deep wound across his ribs that was still bleeding through the emergency bandage. "Name?" Maya asked, pulling on fresh gloves. "Cole," he said. His voice was steady. "Nathan Cole, Sergeant First Class." Combat Rescue. Maya checked his tags and confirmed the information. Combat Rescue was a small unit. They went into dangerous places to pull out wounded soldiers. It was one of the most deadly jobs in the entire military. "Let's get you on a bed," she said. She helped him onto an empty cot in Ward 7. He moved slowly, but didn't complain. As she cut away his torn uniform to examine the wound, she noticed something unusual. His arms were covered in tattoos. Not just a few, hundreds of them. Small symbols, names, numbers, and strange markings covered every inch of skin from his wrists to his shoulders. Some were clearly human names written in English. Others were in scripts she didn't recognize. Some looked like coordinates. Others were tiny pictures, stars, moons, alien symbols she had never seen before. The tattoos continued across his chest and wrapped around to his back. They were dense and overlapping in places, like the man had been collecting them for decades. Maya had seen soldiers with tattoos before. Unit symbols, memorial pieces, that sort of thing. But she had never seen anything like this. "Hold still," she said, focusing on the wound. "This is deep. I need to clean it and close it up." "Take your time," Nathan said. He was looking at the ceiling, breathing slowly. Maya worked in silence for several minutes. She cleaned the wound, applied healing gel, and used a medical stapler to close the edges. It would leave a scar, but he would recover. As she worked, she kept glancing at the tattoos. She couldn't help it. They were fascinating and strange. "Those are quite the collection," she finally said, trying to keep her voice casual. Nathan looked down at his arms. A small smile crossed his face. Tired, but genuine. "Each one's a life I've saved," he said. Maya paused, her hand still holding the medical stapler. She looked at him, waiting for the joke, for the laugh, for some sign that he was exaggerating. He wasn't. "All of them?" she asked. "All of them," he confirmed. He raised his left arm slightly, pointing to a name near his wrist. Private Danny Okonkwo. Pulled him out of a burning transport on Vega Station, 2084. He was 19. His finger moved to another spot. Lieutenant Yuki Tanaka. Recovered her from behind enemy lines on Harlow's Ridge. Took 3 days to walk back. She's a commander now, last I heard. He touched a symbol that looked like twisted branches. "This one is Virecti. A medic named Keth Sora. We were on opposite sides of a battle, found him dying in a crater, carried him to his own lines under a white flag. His people let me go. Maya stared at him. You saved an enemy? I save anyone I can reach, Nathan said simply. That's the job. She finished closing his wound and applied a fresh bandage. Her mind was spinning with questions, but she kept them inside. There would be time later. Over the next few hours, Maya learned more about Nathan Cole from other soldiers in the ward. He was famous, not in the way generals or war heroes were famous. He didn't have medals on display or stories of glorious victories. Instead, he had a reputation that spread through whispers and grateful voices. Cole pulled my sergeant out of a collapsed building on Nexus Prime, one soldier told her. Went in alone while the rest of us were pinned down. We thought they were both dead. 6 hours later, he walks out carrying her on his back. Another soldier, an older woman with burns on her face, spoke quietly. I was on a ship that got hit by enemy fire 3 years ago. We were venting atmosphere, people dying all around us. Cole was part of the rescue team. He sealed our hull breach with his own body armor. Nearly suffocated himself doing it. Saved 11 of us. A young man with a missing arm added his own story. He doesn't fight, you know. I've never seen him fire a weapon in combat. He just goes in, finds the wounded, and brings them back. Doesn't matter how dangerous it is. Doesn't matter who they are. Maya returned to Nathan's bed later that evening. He was sleeping now, his breathing deep and steady. The wound on his side was already beginning to heal. She looked at his arms again, at the hundreds of names and symbols covering his skin. Each one was a person who was alive because of this man. Each one was a story of courage and sacrifice. She thought about her own work in the medical station. She saved lives too, in her own way. She worked in a safe place, with tools and supplies and other doctors to help her. Nathan went into the fire. He walked into battles and explosions and enemy territory. He carried people on his back through danger that would break most soldiers. And he had been doing it for over 20 years. Maya pulled a blanket over him carefully, making sure not to wake him. She had many more questions. She wanted to know about the alien names, about the missions that gave him those scars, about the weight he carried behind those calm eyes. But those stories would come later. For now, she let him rest. Outside the medical station, the dust storm howled against the walls. Somewhere in the distance, artillery fire echoed across the moon's surface. The war continued, as it always did. But in Ward 7, a man with hundreds of names on his skin slept peacefully, dreaming of the ones he had saved and the ones he still hoped to find. 8 years before he arrived at the medical station on Kepler 7, Nathan Cole stood in the ruins of a city called Morrow's Landing. The ceasefire had collapsed 3 hours ago. What was supposed to be a peaceful exchange of prisoners had turned into a bloodbath. Human and Varekti forces were now locked in street-to-street fighting, and Nathan was caught in the middle of it. He crouched behind a broken wall, listening to the sounds of battle. Plasma fire crackled overhead. Explosions shook the ground beneath his feet. Somewhere nearby, someone was screaming. Nathan was 41 years old. He had been doing combat rescue for 15 years at that point, and he had learned to block out the chaos. Focus on the mission. Find the wounded. Bring them home. Grid 7 was 4 blocks away, through active combat zones. Enemy forces controlled 2 of the streets between here and there. On my way, he said. He moved through the ruins carefully, using the destroyed buildings as cover. Twice he had to stop and wait while Varekti patrols passed nearby. Once he heard gunfire so close that dust rained down on his helmet. The hospital shelter had been built into the basement of a large building. When Nathan arrived, he saw that the upper floors had collapsed. Massive chunks of concrete blocked the main entrance. He found a side passage, a narrow gap in the rubble that he could barely squeeze through. It took him 10 minutes to crawl inside, scraping his arms and back against sharp edges. The basement was dark and full of dust. Nathan turned on his helmet light and looked around. Bodies, at least a dozen of them, crushed by falling debris. Human refugees who had come here seeking safety. But there were survivors too. He could hear them. "Hello?" he called out. "Anyone alive? I'm here to help." Voices answered. Weak, frightened voices. Nathan followed the sounds to a corner of the basement that had remained mostly intact. A heavy beam had fallen at an angle, creating a small protected space beneath it. Inside that space, he found 7 survivors, 4 human adults, huddled together and covered in dust, and 3 children. The children were not human. They were Virecti, young ones, barely half the size of adults. Their gray skin was covered in fine scales, and their large dark eyes reflected Nathan's helmet light. 2 of them seemed unharmed, just scared. The third was badly injured, a deep wound across her chest, blue blood seeping through a crude bandage. Nathan froze for just a moment. He had saved Virecti before. Adults, soldiers, medics. Children made everything more complicated. One of the human adults, an older woman with gray hair, spoke quickly. "They were in the shelter when the attack started. Their caretakers ran away. We tried to help, but—" She looked at the wounded Virecti child helplessly. Nathan moved forward and knelt beside the injured child. She flinched when he touched her, but she was too weak to pull away. He examined the wound carefully. It was serious. Without proper treatment, she would die within hours. His radio crackled again. It was his squad leader, Sergeant First Class Aaron Webb. "Cole, where are you? We have extraction in 20 minutes. Get to the landing zone now." "I found survivors," Nathan replied. 7 total. 4 adults, 3 children. One of the children is critically wounded. There was a pause. "How many are human?" Nathan felt something cold settle in his stomach. 4 adults are human. The children are Virecti. Another pause. Longer this time. "Cole, leave the alien kids. We don't have room, and they're not our responsibility. Get the humans and move to extraction." Nathan looked down at the wounded child. She was watching him with those large dark eyes. She didn't understand his language, but she understood fear. She understood pain. She understood that she might die. "I'm not leaving them," Nathan said. "That's an order, Sergeant." "Then it's an order I'm refusing." He turned off his radio. The extraction was happening on the east side of the city. Nathan was on the west side. With wounded and children, he couldn't use the direct route through the combat zones. He would have to go around. 6 kilometers, through rubble and ruins and enemy territory, carrying a dying child. He looked at the survivors. "Can you walk?" The 2 uninjured Virecti children clung to each other, but seemed able to move. Nathan carefully lifted the wounded child into his arms. She weighed almost nothing. Her blue blood stained his uniform. "Stay close to me," he said. "Stay quiet. We're going to make it out of here." They moved through the city like ghosts. Nathan led them through back alleys and collapsed buildings, avoiding the sounds of fighting. The adults helped each other over obstacles. The 2 Virecti children followed in silence, their eyes wide with terror. 3 times they had to hide while patrols passed. Once, a Virecti soldier spotted them from a distance. Nathan raised his hand, showing he carried a wounded child. The soldier hesitated, then looked away and kept walking. 2 hours into the journey, the child in Nathan's arms stopped breathing. He set her down immediately, checking her pulse. Nothing. Her heart had stopped. Nathan didn't think. He just acted. He started chest compressions, counting in his head. He tilted her head back and gave rescue breaths, his mouth covering her small alien face. The human adults watched in shock. The 2 Virecti children made high keening sounds. Crying, Nathan realized. They were crying. He kept working. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3. The child coughed. Blue blood sprayed from her mouth, and she took a gasping breath. Her heart was beating again. Nathan picked her up and kept walking. By the time they reached the extraction zone, his arms were shaking from exhaustion. His back screamed with pain. His boots were worn through, and his feet were bleeding inside them. But they made it. The shuttle pilot stared when Nathan carried the Varekti child aboard. "What the hell is that?" "A patient," Nathan said. "She needs a doctor." Aaron Webb was waiting inside the shuttle. His face was red with anger. "You disobeyed a direct order." "You know what that means?" Nathan set the child down on an empty seat. Her breathing was shallow, but she was alive. "I know what it means," he said quietly. "Do what you have to do. But I wasn't leaving her to die." The shuttle lifted off. The child's hand found Nathan's and held on. Her grip was weak, but it was there. 2 months later, after the paperwork and the hearings and the formal reprimand that went into Nathan's file, he received a message. It came through unofficial channels, passed from Varekti diplomats to human contacts to someone who knew Nathan. The child had survived. Her name was Skrieth. She was recovering with her family on her homeworld. Her parents wanted him to know that she spoke about the human who carried her through the fire. She called him Gentle Hands. That night, Nathan went to a tattoo artist on the space station where he was stationed. He showed her how to write Skrieth's name in Varekti script, using a translation program on his tablet. "What does it mean?" the artist asked. "It means someone lived," Nathan said. The needle pressed into his skin, and he added the first alien name to his collection. It would not be the last. Maya spent the next several days caring for Nathan Cole as his wound healed. They talked often, sometimes for hours at a time. He was the most interesting patient she had ever treated, and she found herself looking forward to their conversations. He told her stories about his missions. Some were exciting, full of danger and narrow escapes. Others were quiet and sad, about people he had found too late, or places that had been too damaged to save. He told her about the names on his arms. "This one," he said, pointing to a small star symbol near his elbow, "is Captain Rosa Delgado. Her ship crashed on an ice moon during a supply run. She was the only survivor. I found her in the wreckage after 3 days. She had kept herself alive by burning pieces of the ship for warmth." His finger moved to another spot. "This is Corporal Jin Park. He was pinned under a collapsed building on Nexus Prime. Everyone thought he was dead. I heard him tapping on the rubble with a metal bar. Took 8 hours to dig him out." Maya listened carefully to each story. She noticed that Nathan remembered every detail. The dates, the places, the names, the faces. These were not just tattoos to him. They were memories etched into his skin. "Do you ever forget any of them?" she asked. "Never," he said. "That's the point." But as the days passed, Maya began to notice other things about Nathan Cole. Things he didn't talk about. His body was covered in scars. Not just the fresh wound on his ribs, but dozens of older marks. Burn scars on his back from plasma fire. A long, jagged line across his leg, where something had cut him open. Small circular marks on his shoulders that looked like puncture wounds. His hands shook sometimes, especially early in the morning. He would grip the edge of his bed to steady them, thinking no one was watching. But Maya was watching. She checked on patients during the night shift, and often found Nathan awake, staring at the ceiling with empty eyes. Sometimes his lips moved, like he was talking to someone who wasn't there. One night, she heard him crying, soft, quiet sounds that he tried to muffle with his pillow. She didn't say anything about it, not at first. Then one afternoon, while changing his bandages, she asked the question that had been building inside her. "How are you still alive?" Nathan looked at her with those tired gray eyes. "Stubborn, I guess." "That's not an answer." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he sighed and sat up on his bed. "You want to know the truth?" he said. "I should have died 100 times, maybe more. Every mission I go on there's a chance I won't come back. I know that. I accept it." He looked down at his hands. "But I keep getting lucky, or unlucky, depending on how you see it. I survive when others don't. I come back when I should have stayed gone." Maya sat down on the edge of his bed. "That's not luck. That's skill. That's courage." Nathan shook his head slowly. "No, courage would be easy. Courage would be clean. What I do isn't clean. It's messy and painful, and sometimes I wonder if it's worth anything at all." "What do you mean?" He was quiet again. When he spoke, his voice was softer than she had ever heard it. "For every name on my skin," he said, "there are 3 or 4 I couldn't save. People I reached too late. People who died in my arms. People I had to leave behind, because there was no way to carry them out." Maya felt her chest tighten. "I remember them too," Nathan continued. "I don't tattoo their names, but I carry them anyway. They're always with me, in my dreams, in the quiet moments when I'm alone, in the faces of strangers who look like people I've lost." He held up his arms, looking at all the names and symbols. "Everyone sees these and thinks I'm some kind of hero, but I know the truth. These aren't trophies. They're apologies. Every time I save someone, I'm trying to make up for all the ones I failed. And it's never enough. It's never going to be enough." Maya didn't know what to say. She had been trained to treat wounds and set bones and stop bleeding. No one had taught her how to heal this kind of pain. "Then why keep doing it?" she finally asked. "Why keep going back?" Nathan looked at her. For a moment something like peace crossed his face. "Because someone has to," he said. "Because if I stop, who's going to do it? Who's going to crawl into the burning buildings and the collapsed shelters and the enemy territory to pull people out?" He touched a name on his wrist. "Skrieth, the Virekti child from years ago. And because every time I save someone, I'm proving something. To myself, to the universe, to everyone watching." "Proving what?" "That we're more than just killers." Nathan's voice was firm now, stronger. "That humans aren't just good at war. We're good at saving people too. We're good at reaching out when everything tells us to pull back. We're good at caring about strangers, even strangers who aren't like us." He looked at Maya directly. "The Virekti think we're monsters. They call us the Deathbringers in their language. And maybe they're right to be afraid of us. We're dangerous. We fight hard, and we don't give up. But that's not all we are." He gestured at his tattoos. "Every name here is proof. Proof that a human being walked into hell to carry someone out. Not for glory, or money, or medals. Just because it was the right thing to do." Maya felt tears forming in her eyes. She blinked them back. "You're not failing them," she said quietly. "The ones you couldn't save. You're honoring them by keeping going." Nathan smiled sadly. "I hope so. Some days it feels that way. Other days—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Maya reached out and put her hand on his arm, over the names. "Can I tell you something?" she said. "Go ahead. When I first came here, I was terrified. I had never seen real combat injuries before. I didn't know if I could handle it. I thought about quitting every single day for the first 2 weeks." Nathan nodded. "What changed?" "I realized that it wasn't about me. My fear, my comfort, my safety, none of that mattered. What mattered was the person on the table. What mattered was doing everything I could to help them survive." She looked at him. "You taught me that. Not in words, just by existing. The other soldiers talk about you like you're some kind of legend. But you're not a legend. You're just a person who decided that other people's lives were worth more than his own fear." Nathan was quiet for a long time. "Thank you," he finally said. "I needed to hear that." Maya squeezed his arm gently. "Get some rest," she said. You're almost healed. They'll probably reassign you soon. Nathan lay back down on his bed. He closed his eyes. Maybe, he said, but not yet. Something tells me there's more work to do here. Outside the medical station, the dust storm continued to rage. But inside, for just a moment, there was peace. The attack came without warning. Maya was checking on patients in Ward 7 when the first explosion shook the medical station. The lights flickered. Emergency alarms began screaming. Dust rained down from the ceiling. "What's happening?" someone shouted. A second explosion, closer this time. The floor trembled beneath Maya's feet. Nathan was already out of his bed. His wound wasn't fully healed, but he moved like a man who had forgotten about pain a long time ago. "Virecti assault," he said, listening to the sounds outside. "Heavy weapons. They're hitting the perimeter." Maya felt ice spread through her chest. The medical station wasn't a military base. It had minimal defenses. "If the enemy decided to push through, we need to evacuate," she said. Nathan nodded. "Get everyone who can walk moving toward the shuttle bay. I'll handle the rest." "You're still injured." "I'm alive," he cut her off. "That's enough." The next hour was chaos. Wounded soldiers poured in from the defensive lines. Maya organized triage as fast as she could, separating those who could move from those who couldn't. The evacuation shuttles began loading, but there were too many patients and not enough room. Nathan moved through the station like a force of nature. He helped carry stretchers. He directed medics to the most critical cases. He made impossible decisions. Who could wait? Who needed immediate transport? Who was beyond saving? Maya watched him work. Despite everything, despite the explosions outside and the screaming wounded inside, Nathan stayed calm. His voice was steady. His hands were sure. He had done this before. Many times. Another explosion rocked the station. This one was close enough to crack the walls. "They're through the outer perimeter," someone shouted. "Enemy forces are inside the compound." The evacuation wasn't complete. There were still dozens of patients who couldn't be moved. If the Virecti came through that door, Nathan stopped what he was doing. He stood very still for a moment, his head tilted like he was listening to something. Then he walked toward the main exit. "Nathan, what are you doing?" Maya called after him. He didn't answer. He just kept walking. She ran after him, catching his arm. "The enemy is out there. You'll be killed." Nathan looked at her with those calm gray eyes. "Maybe," he said, "but I have to try something." "Try what?" "Something I should have done a long time ago." He pulled his arm free and walked out of the medical station. Maya wanted to follow him, but wounded patients needed her. She couldn't leave them, so she watched him go, her heart pounding in her chest. Outside, the battle raged. Plasma fire lit up the dusty air. Human soldiers fought desperately to hold the defensive line. Virecti forces pushed forward, their gray armor gleaming in the harsh light. Nathan walked through the middle of it. He didn't run. He didn't hide. He walked straight toward the enemy line, his hands raised above his head. His uniform was marked with medical symbols, the universal sign of a healer. Virecti soldiers saw him coming. Several raised their weapons. One shouted something in their harsh language. Nathan stopped about 20 meters from the enemy line. He lowered his hands slowly. Then he spoke. His Virecti was broken and rough. He had learned it over 20 years of war, from patients and prisoners and brief peaceful moments between battles. He didn't know all the words, but he knew enough. "I am a healer," he said in their language. "I carry no weapons. I come to speak." The Virecti soldiers looked at each other. No human had ever done this before. A commander stepped forward. She was tall for her species, with dark scales and cold, intelligent eyes. Her armor was decorated with symbols of rank. "You are brave or stupid," she said in Nathan's language. Her accent was thick but understandable. "Why should we not kill you?" Nathan pointed back at the medical station. That building holds only wounded, humans who cannot fight. They are no threat to you. If you destroy it, you gain nothing except more dead. The commander studied him. We are at war. The dead are expected. Yes, Nathan agreed, but they don't have to be. He took a slow step forward. The soldiers around the commander tensed, weapons ready. I have spent 20 years walking onto battlefields, Nathan said. Not to fight, to save. I have carried your people in my arms. I have breathed life into your dying. I have given my blood to keep your wounded alive. He held up his arm, showing the Virecti names tattooed on his skin. Katsora, Vrin of the Third Circle, Skrieth. He spoke each name carefully. They lived because I chose to see them as people, not enemies. The commander's eyes widened slightly at one of the names. Skrieth? A child, Nathan said. I found her in a hospital shelter on Morrow's Landing, 8 years ago. She was dying. I carried her 6 kilometers through combat to save her life. Silence fell over the battlefield. Even the sound of fighting seemed to fade for a moment. The commander stepped closer to Nathan. She looked at his arm, at the names written in her language. I know of Skrieth, she said quietly. The story is told among our people. The human who carried a child through fire. Nathan nodded. That was me. The commander was quiet for a long time. Around her, soldiers waited for orders. In the distance, the battle continued. Why do you do this? She finally asked. Why save your enemies? Nathan smiled sadly. Because you're not my enemies. You're just people. People who are scared and angry, and fighting for things they believe in, just like us. He gestured at the medical station. The people in that building are the same. They're not soldiers anymore. They're just wounded people who want to live. Let them go. Redirect your assault. There's nothing to be gained by killing them. The commander stared at him. Her eyes were unreadable. Then she turned and spoke rapidly in her own language to her soldiers. Nathan couldn't follow all of it, but he caught key words. Medical, non-combatants, alternative route. The soldiers looked surprised. Some seemed angry, but they followed orders. The Virecti forces moved around the medical station, focusing on military targets elsewhere in the compound. The commander looked back at Nathan. This changes nothing, she said. The war continues. I know, Nathan replied. But maybe for one moment, we were more than enemies. The commander said nothing. She turned and walked away, her soldiers following. Nathan stood alone in the dust and smoke. His legs were shaking. His wound had started bleeding again, the bandage soaked red. But the medical station was safe. He walked back inside. Maya was waiting for him, tears streaming down her face. You did it, she whispered. How did you? Nathan shook his head. I just told the truth. That's all any of us can do. He sat down heavily on a crate near the entrance. His face was pale. I need a new bandage, he said, and maybe a nap. She grabbed a medical kit and knelt beside him. Outside, the battle raged on. But the medical station stood untouched, a small island of peace in a sea of war. And Nathan Cole, the man with hundreds of names on his skin, had added one more story to his collection. The battle ended 3 days later. Relief forces arrived from the main fleet, breaking through the Virecti blockade and securing the moon. The fighting stopped, at least for now. Both sides pulled back to lick their wounds and prepare for the next round. The medical station was still standing. Thanks to Nathan, thanks to his impossible walk across the battlefield, dozens of wounded soldiers had survived when they should have died. Word spread quickly through the military. The story of the medic who faced down an enemy army with nothing but words and tattoos became legend almost overnight. Officers called it remarkable. Soldiers called it crazy. Everyone agreed it was the most human thing anyone had done in years. Nathan didn't care about the attention. He avoided the reporters and ignored the requests for interviews. He spent his time in the medical station, helping with patients, talking quietly with the wounded. Maya watched him work. She had learned so much from this man in such a short time. Not just medical skills, but something deeper. A way of seeing the world. A way of believing that people mattered, even in the middle of a war that seemed designed to prove they didn't. On the day the relief forces arrived, she found Nathan sitting alone outside the station. The dust storm had finally cleared, and for the first time in weeks, she could see the stars. He was looking up at them, with a strange expression on his face. Not peaceful exactly, but something close to it. "Room for one more?" she asked. He nodded. She sat down beside him on the rocky ground. "Beautiful night," she said. "It is." His voice was quiet, thoughtful. "I used to sit like this after missions, looking at the stars, trying to remember that the universe is bigger than whatever horror I just walked through." "Does it help?" "Sometimes." He paused. "Not always." They sat in silence for a while. Above them, unfamiliar constellations wheeled slowly across the sky. "What happens now?" Maya asked finally. "For you, I mean." Nathan shrugged. "Same thing that always happens. I heal up, they send me somewhere else. I go back to work." "Another battlefield?" "Probably." Maya frowned. "Don't you ever want to stop? Find somewhere safe, settle down, live a normal life?" Nathan smiled faintly. "What's normal? I've been doing this for over 20 years. This is the only life I know." "But you've given enough. You've saved so many people. Doesn't that earn you some peace?" He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft. "There's no such thing as enough. Not for me. Every person I save, I think about the ones I couldn't. Every life I protect, I remember the lives I lost. The work is never finished. It can't be." He looked at her. "But that's okay, because the work matters. Every single time I pull someone out of the fire, it matters. Not because it makes up for the failures. Not because it earns me anything. It matters because someone who would have died is now alive. That's worth everything." Maya felt tears building in her eyes again. She had cried more in the past week than she had in years. "You did it again," she said. "When you walked out there. When you talked to the enemy commander. You saved all of us." Nathan shook his head. "We saved each other. You kept those patients alive while I was gone. The soldiers held the line long enough for me to try something stupid. None of it works unless everyone does their part." He looked at her directly. "That includes you, Maya. You're a good doctor. You kept your head when everything was falling apart. People are alive because of what you did." Maya wiped her eyes. "I was terrified the whole time. Being terrified and doing it anyway." She laughed softly. "Is that what you tell yourself?" "Every single day." They sat together, watching the stars. Somewhere in the distance, a shuttle engine fired, carrying wounded soldiers to a hospital ship in orbit. "Can I ask you something?" Maya said. "Go ahead." "Will you get a new one? A new tattoo, for today?" Nathan looked down at his arms. The names and symbols covered almost every inch of skin. Some areas were so dense with markings that they overlapped, creating complex patterns. "A few," he said. "I'll need to learn some new names first." He was quiet for a moment. Then he looked at her with something like warmth in his gray eyes. "Maybe I'll add yours someday, if you keep at this long enough." Maya blinked. "Me?" You're just starting your journey. You have years ahead of you, patience to save, moments where you'll have to be brave even when you're scared. If you stay on this path, you'll earn a place." He touched his arm. "These names aren't just about me. They're about everyone who fights to keep people alive. Doctors, medics, rescue workers, ordinary people who see someone in trouble and refuse to look away. We're all part of the same work." Maya looked at him. In the starlight, he didn't look like a legend. He just looked like a tired man who had given everything he had and somehow found more to give. "I'd be honored," she said quietly. Nathan nodded. They sat together in comfortable silence. After a while, Nathan spoke again. There's a Virecti symbol I've been thinking about. It means shelter in the storm. It's what their people call someone who protects others when everything is falling apart. That sounds like you, Maya said. Nathan smiled. Maybe. Or maybe it's what I'm trying to become. He stood up slowly, stretching his injured side carefully. The wound was almost healed now. In a few more days, he would be ready to move again. I'm going to get that symbol tattooed, he said, as a reminder. A reminder of what? He looked out at the stars one last time. That the universe is cold and cruel and doesn't care about any of us. But that doesn't mean we have to be cold and cruel too. We can be the shelter. We can be the ones who reach out when everyone else pulls back. We can be the hands that catch someone when they fall. He offered his hand to help Maya up. That's what it means to be human. Not the fighting, not the war, but the moment when you look at another living being and decide that their life matters to you. Maya took his hand and stood. Thank you, she said, for everything. Nathan nodded. Thank me by being the person you're going to become. Save lives, remember their names, and when it gets hard, and it will get hard, remember that you're not alone. There are others like us out there, scattered across the universe, doing the same work. He let go of her hand and walked back toward the medical station. Maya watched him go. The man with hundreds of names on his skin. The man who walked into fire and came out carrying the ones who couldn't walk themselves. Tomorrow, the war would continue. Ships would fight, soldiers would die, and the universe would keep spinning without caring about any of it. But tonight, on a dusty moon far from Earth, a man had proven that humanity was more than just killers. They were healers. They were rescuers. They were shelter in the storm. And that, Maya thought, was worth fighting for. She turned and walked back inside, ready to continue the work.